I'm saying bye to all the lies and all the times you cried, saying that I wasn't right, yet I was right by your side. You manipulator, playing games, your friends commentators, and I don't know what you say about our private conversations, but it's got them hating. Thanks to all the rumors you be claiming, it's cool, I'm done with you, so they can throw you a celebration. You gon' hate it when you see me with somebody living better. I'm trying to tell you that me just doing me gon' have you jealous.
Hey folks, good morning. Welcome back. This is Chris live in central Pennsylvania. My guest today is Jacques Broodryk from AfriForum, responsible for the security. Jacques, welcome back to the program. We're going to talk a little bit today about your recent meeting with the South African Police Service. How's it going?
Hey Chris, wow, we're pretty busy. Thanks for the invitation. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Yeah, pretty busy is an understatement, as am I. Yours coincides with a lot of events. Mine coincides with President Trump's arrival back in office about a week before he went in office. I've been working 15, 18 hours a day. I just went off the air about 4 hours ago, so here we are back again. All right, so you guys had a meeting with the police, and I believe it's discussed the way that they're compiling data for farm attacks and farm murders. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. What this actually stemmed from was very insensitive remarks that the Minister of Police made during a media conference, where we got the impression that he was trying to downplay the seriousness of farm attacks by claiming that only one landowner, one farmer was murdered, and stating that the other people who were murdered on farms weren't farmers, and that's never been AfriForum's position. So we disputed that. He requested that we meet with the quite a high-ranking delegation of the SAPS, and we had a very good and positive discussion. We discussed the cases that we had on record compared to theirs. We agreed on certain things. We agreed to disagree on others, and we came to the conclusion that we will be having more meetings and more discussions and keeping communication channels open between us and the SAPS on an operational level. And that's a very good thing, because that's what we want. As soon as the politicians start getting involved, that's when things get messy.
Well, it sounds like things went well with the police, and then it went wonky when the politicians got involved after the meeting.
Yeah, well, it's interesting that we saw these comments from the Minister and the Presidency yesterday, claiming that AfriForum conceded that they were spreading misinformation, and we conceded that we had wrong stats and conceded to all kinds of things, which really wasn't the case. She wasn't in the meeting, and I find it very interesting that it's the Minister and the Presidency who's commenting and not even the police minister himself. I think that shows you clearly that this is a political game that's being played. They're removing it from the Minister of Police himself. And it's pure politics and very reckless.
Well, along those lines, Jacques, yesterday the Independent Line ran a story about the minister in the presidency, Bezuidenhout, in which she tried to rubbish the concept that the South African Chamber of Commerce USA had turned over 70,000 names of commercial farmers that want to come to the United States as refugees. So I didn't have to go any further than that when I actually literally broke into laughter, because there's only 28 to 32,000 commercial farmers left in South Africa. So that's silly. And I said that to my audience as I read it live, because it happened. I was looking for something else as I was live on the program. I read that and I said, what is she, smoking crack cocaine? I mean, no one said there were commercial farmers. Then the story says commercial farmers. Then it says Afrikaner farmers. Farmers were never mentioned. No one ever claimed 70,000 farmers want to leave South Africa. This is a disinformation campaign coming from her. I don't know what her deal is, but it's not just the issue with murders, farm murders plus more. It's also with just the truth. She seems to have an allergic reaction to the truth.
Unfortunately, that is the type of knee-jerk reaction that we've been seeing since President Trump has been cast in the spotlight on these issues that AfriForum has been campaigning on for years. All of a sudden, everything that you say and that you can back up, things that have been common knowledge for years, have now become disinformation. And I think that's a very, very worrying trend that we're seeing in the ANC government at the moment.
Well, we're seeing it from her, but Jacques, unfortunately, it's not simply her. It's across the board. It's a lot of people involved with the government. It's certainly any senior member of the formerly ruling, but now in coalition African National Congress. But they even drug out academics. I mean, Newsroom Africa tried to rubbish me by claiming I said something I never said. It's demonstrably provable what I said. I was talking about this professor from Stellenbosch who made the false claim that President Trump had applied sanctions to South Africa. There are no sanctions on South Africa. The only thing that happened is we quit giving you free handouts. But you weren't the only ones. The entire world lost foreign aid in one fell swoop on January 20th. But instead of just being responsible adults, South African politicians started screaming from the roof, "Hey, attack South Africa. Well, Bangladesh lost their funding. Philippines lost their funding. It's across the board. And then eventually they wound up losing all the funding because they kept crying about it. But Newsroom Africa attacked me, saying that I had, not by name, mind you, but by reputation, attacked me, saying that I had accused her of spreading false information about land reform. I didn't talk about land reform. I was talking about, lying about sanctions. There are no sanctions. It's unfortunately, Jacques, the first casualty of war is the truth. And it may not be a shooting war, but we're certainly an information war going on right now coming out of South Africa.
Yeah, well, I just want to touch on what you mentioned there now about the misinformation campaigns and land reform, for instance. The issue of land grabs, technically illegal land grabs, but these guys still get away with it. This has been an issue in South Africa for decades. It's a common thing. Every journalist in this country knows about it or has reported on it. As soon as we started comparing that to saying, listen, this has been happening, now you were signing the expropriation law into comparison. All of a sudden, there were no land grabs happening in South Africa. That's just one of the examples. It's crazy times that we're living in, and people need to be very, very cautious who they lend their ears to nowadays.
Well, it's interesting you say that because, funnily enough, I think that someone didn't give the playbook to the South African Broadcasting Corporation, state-owned broadcaster, because they foolishly went to Shishecho in Limpopo, formerly Petersburg, now Polokwane, and accurately and honestly reported land grabs as they were happening around them. People staking out land, and they're claiming that, we're doing this in response to the president signing Expropriation Act. This gives us the authority to take this land, and we expect that Polokwane will come out and deliver services and water and abolition and sewage and police and fire and schools and pave the roads. And we expect them to do that because the president said we can do this. That was followed up by East London. There was another, they're taking in farmland there. Then Fort Jackson, Northwest, we've seen it as well. It's happening all over. The strange thing is, Jacques, you know this better than I do because you're on the ground, but I've been following it for the past 3 decades, is that many times in the past, before the Expropriation Act was put back into Parliament and actually started moving forward in 2018 under Ramaphosa, of all people, who claimed it's very something different. But ever since then, it's been different. Prior to that, whenever land was occupied, especially if it was state-owned land, the ANC would send out the Red Ants, they'd hire them, or the Johannesburg Metro Police would go out in Gauteng, and they would evict people off this land frequently, sometimes even off private property, but not always. Now, they're just looking the other direction. They're just completely ignoring what's going on for the most part.
Yeah, that's also something that we have to see in perspective. They tend to act when there's something at stake. And when I mean something at stake, I mean something lining politicians' personal pockets. That's when they do act. If municipal land is being grabbed, but some politician, some official there has some deal promised to some Chinese company to develop a factory there in 3 years' time, and he's getting a kickback from it, then you will see them respond very quickly. They will get rid of those land grabbers in an instant. You wouldn't even have to ask them. But when there's not something at stake like that, or it's private property, then it's a very different issue. AfriForum has been involved in numerous cases where we had to basically force the police to open trespassing cases, because that's the first thing you need to do. And they say, no, you need to get a court order. I'm like, we don't need to get a court order. These people entered this property illegally 2 hours ago. You need to arrest them for trespassing. And then you actually have to go to court and get court orders to force the police to open cases, and then eventually try and get them to act with the help of private security to get these people removed. You can imagine that's a very lengthy and a very expensive process, and the damage that's done to that property or to the land in that time while people are illegally erecting structures there is also immense. So it's a very big problem, and government simply only acts when there's something at stake for them personally.
Yeah, that would be my perception, and that's why I say a lot of the state land in the Gauteng area, they would go out there almost immediately to remove them because there's certainly some vested interest there with the state land. There's another thing happening now, Jacques. I don't know if you want to comment on this, and I'm not saying speculation, but it seems rather odd. There was an arrest of farmers from a dairy farm near Derby in Northwest Province, just below Mahalisburg, just a day or two ago. Interesting enough, that arrest was effected, claiming that they had been hiring illegal employees and there was NFO. The police, if I'm not mistaken, allowed the Poppy Act to be violated by allowing someone or they themselves filmed the arrest of these people. And in that, you can hear either a police officer or someone in the crowd calling the farmer a damn racist because he hired foreigners. I find that interesting since the employees were black. I'm not really sure how he's a racist, but oh well. That's, I guess, people with 30% education, that's what they come up with. But my point is that I believe they violated the Poppy Act. But beyond that, it's interesting because I can go to every restaurant, every hotel in Gauteng and find illegal aliens working in all these businesses. I'm curious why this farm was targeted and what's going on. At the same time, we've also saw someone that owns a shop where these EFF guys showed up and have threatened him and claiming he doesn't have a license to operate. He's hiring illegal aliens. I get the sense, and that there's more incidents. This is just two, just in the past couple of days. There seems to be an intimidation campaign going on, either officially or unofficially, by opposition politicians and perhaps even by members of the government to intimidate minorities in South Africa. That's just my perspective. And I don't know if you're picking up on that or if that's just a stretch.
Well, let me first of all say, Chris, that AfriForum believes in law and order, and we believe in following the rule of law, and people shouldn't be employing illegal immigrants, whether you are black or white or pink. There is a rule of law for a reason. That being said, we have been aware for quite some time now of an apparent campaign or an effort from Home Affairs and the South African Police Service to kind of clamp down on the agricultural industry regarding the hiring of illegal farmers. So to what extent this has been put into action, I'm not aware. Whether this is an official sanctioned operation or just some person's personal gripe that they're trying to enforce, I'm not aware. But like I said, people shouldn't be employing illegal foreigners.
Well, 100%. That's my point. I agree. People should not be hiring illegals, and whether it's there or here, especially here. It's one of our problems over here is people hiring illegal aliens, which drive down wages and harm people who live in this country and are citizens and lawful green card holders. But no, it's a concerning thing that I've noticed. I'm wondering if anyone else picked up on that. So this whole expropriation without compensation thing seems to have touched off on a nerve and has emboldened a number of people in South Africa who have not the best intentions at heart. At least that's my view from the outside. Are you picking up on that as well, or is that, again, am I making a stretch here?
No, I think it's pretty obvious. Anyone who thinks that the expropriation without compensation bill is going to be used for the good of the people living in a dream world. The ANC has a 30-year track record of governing in which they've done nothing but steal and corrupt and enrich themselves. Nothing's going to change that. I think people are seriously naive if they think that this bill is for the good of the country.
Well, Jacques, you spent a lot of time up on the border with Zimbabwe looking at the joke of border security and defense that takes place up there, how easy it is for people to cross and get into South Africa. Has that situation improved, or is it degraded, or has it remained pretty much the same, largely a wide open border?
No, it's the same situation, Chris. Unfortunately, our safety structures up there are doing what they can do to safeguard their communities. But unfortunately, the problem, in my opinion, has gotten worse. I think more illicit trade is taking place and coming across that border in both directions. And I think more and more politicians are involved in getting some cream off the top of those illegal doings.
Now, one of the things that AfriForum does, and I know this from firsthand experience, even though I'm a foreigner, I know this from firsthand experience because I've gone out with them, is AfriForum has community patrols. And my experience was with community patrol in Zeerost is that those folks patrol the entire town and the townships and neighborhood. They didn't reserve their patrolling to white or Afrikaner neighborhoods. We went everywhere. In fact, I have been to Zeerost probably hundreds of times because I used to live in Botswana and drive through there all the time. I didn't know there was an Indian neighborhood in Zeerost, but I found out because we patrolled it. And it turns out it's a very dangerous neighborhood in Zeerost, but we also went to black neighborhoods and the Indian neighborhood and mixed neighborhoods and white neighborhoods and, every neighborhood under the sun. And we did that. People spent their own petrol. They spent their own time. They put their own selves at risk traveling around. And they did that in conjunction and coordination with the South African Police Service, which means to me that they must have had a good relationship. I hope that's continued. That's a couple of years ago now, 2023, when I did that. But that's important, is it not? Because you're doing essentially, neighborhood watch, and you have to have a good relationship with the police so that they can respond in case somebody observes something.
Yeah, of course, that's very important. And I have to add, while we're on this topic, that although we have extreme challenges in the South African Police Service, we still have a lot of dedicated, hardworking cops on ground level. And these guys are just as frustrated as the public is with what's happening in this SAPS. But AfriForum on ground level has a very good working relationship with the police. They appreciate the effort that our volunteers and our patrollers put in. They appreciate the backup. We often support them with drones, with night vision capabilities, things they don't have access to. And of course, we appreciate them assisting us when we need to address certain issues in neighborhoods, and we need the law to work on our side. So they on ground level, we don't have any issues. We work together very well. Once again, it's when it gets higher up, when it gets to a political level, it seems to start getting a problem. And this is something I addressed in the meeting that we had with SAPS the other day as well, directly. I said to them that although we appreciate this meeting that was now called by the minister, this is not an operational issue. You and I both know that SAPS and AfriForum have a very good working relationship on ground level. This is a political issue that needs to be addressed at a political level. Not to be ungrateful for the meeting. We can always extend our courtesies and build better bridges. But as long as we have politicians who are ill-willed, we are going to have challenges in this country.
Well, my experience, Jacques, on the ground, and having been pretty much all over South Africa, with the exception of Kruger, I haven't been up in that area, and Limpopo and that part of the country. But I've been all over South Africa many, hundreds of times, spent much time in South Africa over the past 30 years. My experience is that South Africans who I've met, black, white, brown, Indian, color, and it really doesn't matter. Zulu, Xhosa, Afrikaner, Portuguese, Venda, Tswana. Most folks I've met just want to get along, just want to raise their family, practice their faith, have success, their kids do well in school. And don't really have trouble with their neighbors, and don't really envy their neighbors, although everyone probably wants to have more money. I mean, it's just the nature of life, but they just tend to get along. And these differences tend to be driven by people with political ambitions or political desires. And the consequence is really a poisonous, toxic mix of race relations in the media, in politics, and on social media. But on the ground, most of the time, there's racists of all stripes, colors, but most of the time, my experience has been South Africans just tend to get along for the most part.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. The South Africa that you'll see on X is not the same South Africa that you'll find on the streets. But unfortunately, when you have people with influence who say ridiculous things and extremist things, eventually those influences do start to straw over. Because now you've got some commentator on X saying something that really infuriates someone else, who's actually been a victim of a farm attack, who's had a family member who's been a victim of a farm attack. That person responds from an emotional place. Now someone else reading this conversation gets frustrated and responds back from an emotional place. And then people carry that into the days and into the streets. So it's once again why I say generally South Africans get along well. I mean, there's goodwill among common people. But we have these agitators and we have a government who's dishonest and hell bent on stirring and apparently just driving this country off a cliff.
Well, sadly, we saw the Constitutional Court this week, for some reason, suddenly decide not to take up the leave to appeal case for the Kill the Boer, or Shoot the Boer, Kill the Farmer song that's being sung by Julius Malema and a handful of others, which is a highly divisive song. It's very insulting. It's very, it's meant to intimidate. From my perspective, from the outside, I would look at that as terroristic threats, the way it's sung. But they claim it's a heritage song, and the courts have decided not to take up that case, which is akin to our Supreme Court, which chooses which case it takes. You know, if they're looking for cases that are clear cases of constitutionality, sometimes they'll take a case, sometimes they won't, and they can only take so many cases. In this situation, they chose not to take the case up, so effectively it's dead, which means that Malema and others can sing that song, but the Union flag apparently is hate speech, and an Arabic word for unbeliever apparently is hate speech, and but, you know, we see nothing happening to the likes of Nota Boloye, who says white people are subhumans and genetically inferior to black people, and he wants to slaughter them and drive them in the sea. Apparently you can say those sorts of things. It seems to me, Jacques, that the temperature is being turned up against ethnic minorities in South Africa, at least from the outside, and that's kind of sad. This court case is not going to help the situation. Are there any concerns in the communities in South Africa about what's happening, about the court's decision not to take up the case this week?
Chris, let me just take a step back there, and let's just talk about the highly debated intent and meaning behind the singing of "Kill the Boer, Kill the Farmer." Now, yeah, it's an old song. It's an old struggle song. That is correct. But let's look at the case of the young farm manager, Brendan Horner, who was murdered and tied to a pole in a veld. When his murder accused appeared in the courts, the economic freedom fighters, for some reason, felt the need to march to the courts to go and show their support to the murder accused. Why would you do that? And then they had the goal to, outside of the courtroom, while Brendan Horner's grieving parents were sitting inside, they had the goal to stand outside the court and chant, "Kill the work, kill the farmer." So why would you do that if it's about dismantling power structures or economic freedom? Don't come with nonsense like that. The intent is very, very clear. Now, as far as this decision by the Constitutional Court is concerned, it's also pretty obvious what's happening here. Because a day before they issued that response, AfriForum sent a letter to the president asking him to condemn the singing of the song. The president's response was, if AfriForum has a problem with this, they should take it up in the courts. The day after that, the Constitutional Court released a finding saying they're not going to entertain the appeal without even hearing our arguments. So the fact that there's political interference going on here is pretty obvious for anyone to see. And yes, that does concern people. It does turn up the temperature in certain areas and certain discussions. But from AfriForum's side, we are going to continue fighting this fight. We will not accept it. We will continue raising awareness on the international stage. We will continue to build safe communities and organized communities. And the president and his friends are making a mistake if they think we are just going to take this.
Well, Jacques, it's purely a coincidence that the president suggested you go to the courts, and then the courts come back and say that I want to talk to you the next day. You should stop being such a conspiracy theorist, my friend. That's purely coincidental. Had nothing to do with politics, I'm sure.
Yeah, you're right, Chris. Maybe I'm getting a bit paranoid.
Just because they're coming after you doesn't mean you're paranoid. Anyway, but wow. I got to say that's... Yeah, no, it's disheartening. And the thing about the courts, look, I mean, let me go back to a case here. It was at the something Broodryk over on the other side of South, and then the east side of South Africa. It's early morning here, senior moment. But that property over there that was a game ranch, there was an effort to expropriate it. The notice came like on a Friday. AfriForum in solidarity, I think, jumped in, or AfriForum, to help them legally. They raised money. In that case, they had to defend themselves, were able to stop the dispossession of the property. And then it went to the courts, and they had to spend a ton of money, a lot of rand, to defend themselves. In the meantime, the coal company, which is based in Australia, with a board comprised over 50% of Chinese nationals, wanted that land. And eventually, the guys who owned it just sold out. They gave up. And so the media and the government say, well, there's no expropriation. Well, it wasn't expropriation. It was the threat of expropriation, which forced the sale of the land. And the people who actually are claimants to the land aren't even the ones who got it. It was sold to a coal company. And yes, it was sold for 4 times the low ball offer that the government made, which was ridiculous. That's why they wouldn't give, they wanted to go to court. So they did sell it for 4 times. I think it was 80 million rand they sold it for to the coal company. The coal company never minded, and now it belongs to the Saudi prince, and the people with the land claim, the poor black South Africans, don't have the land. It's owned by Saudi prince. It's not a game ranch anymore, except for his personal use. And the coal company doesn't know anymore. This is the power of government to put pressure on people. You don't have to use expropriation without compensation, or expropriation. In that case, it was expropriation with compensation, and it wasn't fair and just compensation. It was unjust compensation. So they had to go to court, and they had to get help from other people because they didn't have the money to defend themselves. This is an oppressive and illegitimate and immoral use of the law, in my view. That's one example. So when people say there's no expropriation, maybe not, but there has been expropriation with compensation since 1990s, and that's perfectly legal as long as it's fair and just. But this wasn't. They wound up selling out, and they're out of business. The game ranch is not there. The 30 or 40 people who work there no longer have jobs. Some Saudi prince who's not a South African owns the land, and the people who wanted the land, they're still like, hey, we claim this land. What about us? That seems to be the direction this goes all too often.
It does, but people are also either being dishonest or misinformed about when they claim that there's never been expropriation. So even in that case that you're referring to, and I'm guessing you're referring to the Ackerland farm case.
Ackerland Broodryk, that's the one. Ackerland Broodryk.
Yeah. The title deed was actually changed. The court found that the registrar of the deeds had to rechange it back to the original owner's name, so it was expropriated. The fact that they sold it after that doesn't erase the fact that the title deed was changed against their will. So that's my first point. The second point is there's another case that's still in front of the courts now, where a private property owner owns a commercial property. He rented it to a local Department of Health who used it as a mortuary. They stopped paying him rent for a number of years, and eventually got an eviction order against them. When the eviction order got served, they simply informed him that they were expropriating his property. So people really need to be honest about this. This has been happening in South Africa, and now government just has more power to do that.
Well, there are some people making the argument that Donald Trump paying attention has just simply made it worse. Others argue that it's nice, finally, that someone, a world leader, probably arguably for the first time in a positive fashion, not simply a negative fashion, the first time since the Boer republics and the German Empire actually recognized Afrikaners as a community of people, is actually says something positive. But I think regardless of whether Trump is involved or not, or said or did anything, whether he put an executive order out there or an offered refugee status to Afrikaners, whatever definition that might be by the United States government, whether he did it or not, the pressure has been turned up ever since this government of national unity has been formed. First, the Bella Bill was introduced, and I don't understand why black South Africans are not up in arms, because it forces their children who don't speak a word of English when they go to primary school and standard 1 or first grade, whatever you call first grade there in South Africa, they are going to be taught in English, which is a colonial language. That's my first language, but it's a colonial language in South Africa. Only 6% of your population speaks it as a first language, and Venda kids and Swana kids and Zulu kids and Afrikaner kids are not going to be forced to be taught in English, and local school boards have their authority taken away from them, and parents whose kids are truant can be put in prison. I mean, this is a disaster for education in South Africa, and only Afrikaners seem to be speaking up, and AfriForum's Solidarity among the few. You've got that. Then you've got the Expropriation without compensation bill, which becomes an act now, which is clearly unconstitutional. It's in complete disagreement with Section 25 of the Constitution. This was happening regardless of whether Trump became president or not, and whether Trump said anything or not. So I would argue that it doesn't really matter whether Trump was there. The temperature has been turned up against South Africa's minorities by a government that's increasingly unpopular and lashing out, trying to save whatever support it has amongst voters. That's my take on it. And what do you think? Am I off the mark here?
No, I think you're absolutely correct, and it's part of this campaign that we've been seeing the last couple of months, or maybe even longer, where anything that the government does wrong, which is a hell of a lot, gets blamed on someone else. And we have seen historically that minorities are generally easy scapegoats, and that's exactly what's happening here again. Shoot the messenger instead of the person who committed the crime in the first place. That's what the South African government has been doing. But I do believe that more and more people are starting to wake up and starting to see things for what they are. And I really hope that is the case.
Well, it's incumbent on leaders to take responsibility for failure, and I'll do so now. We started 3 minutes late. That was entirely my fault, not Jacques' fault. So I'll let you guys know that's on me. Unlike the ANC, I can admit when I've made a mistake. Just kidding. But Jacques, before we wrap up, it's really disheartening to see what's happening in South Africa. As I said, South Africans tend to get along, but these are very real issues, and they're being swept under the carpet by a government and a media and a social media who claim there's nothing going on. I found it beyond. It's not comical in the funny sense. It's comical in the ironic sense that the government and others are rubbishing the fact that farmers are under attack, that minorities are being discriminated against, and there's no reason to go anywhere. And now all over the place, we're seeing people telling the minorities to get out. You have no business here. You're not African. You're not South African. I mean, come on. Either you are or you aren't. Either there's something happening, there's not something happening. This is all over the place. It's almost psychotic, the response from much of South Africa regarding these issues. Yeah,
I think that response that you've referred to now, and the shifting of the goalposts, the continuous shifting of the goalposts, is a clear indication that what the motives really are, and the fact that the arguments that government and government supporters rely on don't hold any water.
I would agree. Before we wrap up, because you've got to go, it's just a short conversation this morning compared to my usual ones. Sometimes we go for 90 minutes, but you've got some other things to do, as do I. But Jacques, I want to talk about very quickly that this refugee offer that President Trump has made to South Africa, The South African Chamber of Commerce USA, which is an American business based here, largely of former South Africans, naturalized Americans, and it does business here to help businesses get in the South African market and build ties both sides. They have nothing to do with immigration whatsoever, but they were inundated because they were among the first, like I was, to announce this. They announced it within the first 2 hours of Trump executive order, as did I. I went live and had 38,000 people tuning in asking questions, but both of us were inundated. They turned over a list of 67,042 heads of household names to the American Embassy, which the embassy won't do much with. They have that database now, but by law, there's a different process for it. This group, calling themselves Amerikaners, which is comprised of naturalized Americans from South Africa and some South Africans in South Africa, have been putting together information, general public information about what it's like to live in America, the cost of living in places, unemployment rates, how to do different things, get a license, driver's license, so on and so forth. They turned over a list of 27,000 names. Now, there was some duplication. Some people contacted both of them, but 27,000 names. That takes us out to about 94,000. And by their own admission, people who went and who had preliminary interviews at the U.S. Embassy in Hatfield, which is not the way this is going to be done. It's just a fact-finding effort by the embassy to find out what's going for the Department of State, what's going on and what the interest is. They told people they interviewed that over 30,000 inquiries had reached them at the address that they had put up on the 10th of February. And that was 2 weeks ago when they shared that. So we're talking at least 120, 130,000 heads of household express interest. With average family size, recognize that there are widows and widowers and single 20-year-olds and 30-year-olds, but some people have 5 kids and 7 kids. An average family size of 4, that's 5,496,000 potential people interested in refugee status to come to America. If, in fact, this program goes forward and even a fraction of those people come out, this will be devastating to South Africa, to its country, to its tax base, to its community. In particular, the Afrikaans-speaking community. It's going to have a massive impact, and not in a good way. Now, I'm not saying the Afrikaner community will die and die off. It survived the end of the Boer War, going through concentration camps where 16,000 women and children were starved to death and died from infectious disease. And it came back, the community, and survived that. But this is really, really, and I don't begrudge anyone trying to come to America. I'm also not encouraging them. But this truly, truly is not potentially a very bad outcome for South Africa. It may be a very good outcome for those who come to America, but it may be a very bad outcome regardless of which direction it goes. Even if it's 10 or 20,000 people, it's frightening. And these are the people, and you're an Afrikaner. We both know Afrikaners are very suspicious with good reason through their history. These are the people who were willing, because either they're desperate or they're just curious, to tell someone, hey, I'm interested. Imagine how many people haven't stepped forward, and if a program starts, they find out what the conditions are and they qualify, there might be a rush for the floodgates. I mean, it's unprecedented, and we might be talking about the Groottrek 2.0. Any thoughts on what that could do to South Africa? Because I'm a little concerned about South Africa if this comes out.
Yeah, it's a very interesting debate, Chris, and I think we're very early in the game. We don't know what the conditions are going to be, what the offer is going to be, exactly who it's going to include. You referenced earlier that there's a big mix-up sometimes between Afrikaners and farmers, and Afrikaner farmers, and so forth. But I'm sure the U.S. administration will do their homework well, as they always do. But at this stage, it's very early to speculate. What I can tell you is that I can't blame anybody who will take up the offer. You can't hold that against anybody, and I would wish anyone the best if they decide to do so. Things are not easy in this country. We have a government who is hell-bent on making it even harder for us. So they definitely can't blame anyone for doing that. I will also say that it will be a very difficult decision to make, to leave the country of your birth, the country that your ancestors were born in, died in, fought for, lived for, and where you as a people found your foundation and where you were made. So I don't think it's going to be an easy decision for people to make, but I'm sure a lot of people will take up the offer. As far as AfriForum as an organization is concerned, we are focused on building a safe, a prosperous community and home for Afrikaners here on the south end of Africa, and that is what we will continue to do.
Well, along that line, since this has been mentioned, I know that AfriForum and Solidarity came to the States. I sat down with Flip Bice and with others and interviewed them when they were here, including Kali Creel. Just a piece of advice, then I'll get your final comments. If in fact these ludicrous treason charges go forward and actually people are charged with it, I would recommend that they hire Rebecca Davis as a witness for them, because she ran a Daily Maverick article in which she claimed that they didn't meet with anybody in America. They didn't meet the White House. They just went on the tour like everybody does. So, I mean, how could they possibly be accused of spreading misinformation or lying about what's going on in South Africa when they didn't talk to anybody except the people at Disney World? So I would call Rebecca Davis as my first witness. And when she's in the docket, you could ask her to address the fact that she called me a right-wing podcaster when I'm actually a university lecturer, a published author, a counterintelligence officer, a colonel. And I just, let's get the facts right, while she's going to be on the stand. But that'd be my recommendation to the defense team at AfriForum, that you call Rebecca Davis as an eyewitness. But seriously, Jacques, I always give my guests the last word here. So a chance for you to share anything you want to share, anything positive about what's going on in the face of all this stuff. Because I think a lot of people feel buffeted by the winds that are approaching them now. And sometimes it may feel like a cyclone coming at you with the Kill the Boer song being determined okay, what Nota Baloy is saying in the public and people listening to it, and just, the situation in general where the rule of law oftentimes seems to be applied selectively, and the police are inundated with the lack of resources, and they try their best at times, but some of them are corrupt. It's just a difficult situation from my perspective from the outside. But then this is an outside view. I'm not living in South Africa every day, so I'm not on the ground every day. You are on the ground. You do talk to people. You do participate in these forums. You do work closely with the police. Do you have a message of hope, perhaps, or maybe just warn people? Be careful out there. Be safe.
Let me give you one quick example, Chris, of good things that are happening. And these are the things we always joke. We say this is our most hardworking colleague at AfriForum who gets the least press time, and that's Barend Ace, our head of intercultural relations. Because the successes that him and his department reach just simply get ignored by the media. Yesterday, he sent out a press release where AfriForum and Afrikaners and the Barolong Buseleka, who are an indigenous community in the Free State, again reaffirmed their commitment to cooperation and the friendship that they've been celebrating for 100 years now, since they helped us in a battle many, many years ago. So, those type of stories just simply don't get the airtime that they do. What gets the airtime is politicians saying hateful things, people responding to that. But there's a lot of good going on in this country, and people should take note of that as well.
Wait a second here. Now, I am well known for having told people when I started doing this broadcasting about 5 years ago, when a lot of white South Africans are feeling buffeted like they're all alone. I said, hang on a second here. White South Africans, first off, Afrikaners. But let's start with Boers and expand it to Afrikaners. There's 2.8 million of you, and they're like, we can never win elections here because black South Africans will never vote for anyone except the ANC. Well, that's been rubbished. ANC support has dropped from 69 all the way down to 40%, which, by the way, I predicted in November 2021. It's the 38 to 42% in that election last year. So their support has dropped, and yes, it's gone to MK and EFF, which are just, angry, naughty children offshoots. But my point was that there are natural constituencies, natural relations, natural ties between the Boers, the Afrikaners, and white South Africans and colored South Africans. You add them in culturally, linguistically. Many of them are very close, and the DNA is shared in many cases. And then you go beyond that, Indians share many of the same concerns. And next thing you go from a community of 2.8 million to 13 to 15 million South Africans who share similar concerns. Not all, but many. And it's a lot bigger. And I mentioned people like, what are you talking about, Chris? Don't you talking about? But I'm like, don't you know the history of the Great Trek? Don't you know the history of South Africa? I mean, the Trek Boers allied themselves with the Barolong, with the Bakwang, with the Griquas, the Sotho tribes. I know the Sotho and the Trek Boers fought 4 wars. I get that. But they allied themselves to fight off Mzilikazi and the Ndebele, who had fled from KZN during the Mfikane and moved up into the Highveld and were preying upon the groups that were there who were disparate, small, and disconnected. Into that vacuum came the Trek Boers, who were also attacked by the Ndebele, and they often allied themselves with these Swana and Sotho-based peoples and the Griquas. This is a true history that I tell people, and they look at me like I'm crazy, like they've never heard this story before. I just heard you say the Barolong. This is one of the groups I mentioned. My retelling of South African history seems to be something that's surprising and new to many South Africans, but you just mentioned something that I've been talking about for years.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. South Africa has a very complex history, and people just have to look at it logically. What makes any relationship work? And that is a shared value system. That's how it works. So people should stop looking at South Africa as black and white. There are numerous cultural communities with shared values where it matters, and then there are certain communities with different values. So that's something that people really need to take into perspective before just looking at South Africa as a chessboard.
Well, I think the bottom line here is that someone shouldn't judge a package by its wrapping. That's the bottom line. The fact that you have been cheated by nature, you and I, insufficient skin pigmentation, me more so than you. I fry like a lobster. That's why I'm cowering in the semi-darkness here over Cape Town at the moment, because that sun is evil to me. But we've been cheated at skin pigmentation, making us very vulnerable to the ultraviolet rays of that big shiny object in the sky. No, I'm not talking about Joe Biden. I'm talking about the sun. So, people shouldn't judge a package by its wrapping. And I think that's the bottom line of the story here is South Africans have a lot in common, and hopefully they can survive together. Jacques Broodryk, it's always a pleasure to have you back on. Thank you for your help. Thank you for what you do for the safety and security of all South Africans, even though many people don't recognize that. And good luck. Again, don't forget, tell the lawyers if they need a defense witness, Rebecca Davis, she works for the Daily Maverick. She'll help you out. No one saw anything. Nobody talked to anybody in D.C. It's all just propaganda. I want to make sure that that these charges are dismissed.
Chris, thank you very much for the opportunity, and thanks for the work that you do. Highly appreciate it.
It's my pleasure. Jacques Broodryk from AfriForum. Thanks a lot. I'll let you drop off, and I'll wrap up. I got some super chats I have to address here.
Thanks.
All right, folks. So that was Jacques Broodryk from AfriForum. I hope you found that interesting. Let me get to the super chats and the new members who were here as a courtesy. I don't want to ignore anybody. All right, so I may need some reading glasses at this hour of the morning. This is becoming a more common occurrence here. I guess I have to succumb to the ravages of age or the damage done to my retina. So Erica Holtzkamp gave a 70 Rand super chat and says, thanks to Chris and Jacques. My pleasure. Dion Olafira at 21 Rand super chat. Thank you for that super sticker. AJ became a member. Thank you. AJ gifted a membership. And then Van gave a super chat for 140 super Rand. Hit the like button. Don't be a roof looker. I like that. A roof kika. All right. And then there's Jacobus de Vos has become a member. Let me turn on the alert box again. All right. Thank you very much, Jacobus de Vos. And thanks to my guest, Jacques Broodryk. For me, folks, I just went to bed a few hours ago. I just got up, and I really got up just in time for this. That's why we're a couple minutes after the top of the hour, because I had to relog back into my account. I got logged out of Google for some reason, and that took a few minutes. So that's on me, and thank you for your patience. Thank you for being here. Be sure to hit the like button. All 50. Quids just gave 50 memberships. I got to turn that off. I can't sit here and do 50 salutes. I've got to get to the dentist for a follow-up for dental work I had done last year. It's free, courtesy. It's part of the initial charge I paid last year. And by the way, as a military retiree, I had to pay out of pocket. $1,200, I think, or $1,400 US. So about 30,000 Rand for that dental work. Ouch. No coverage, no care, no treatment. And that's kind of sucks, but that's reality. And this was the follow-up for it. So I'll be back later this morning with the news. And later this afternoon, it's URC, United Rugby Championship action over on the Rugby Ascendant channel. I'll be doing play-by-play color commentary of the Stormers taking on Ulster up at Kingspan Stadium, a place that I've been to for the Women's Rugby World Cup in 2017 in Ireland. So please tune in for that on Rugby Ascendant. If you're not familiar with it, we'll mention again. I'll be back to do the news here after I come back from the dentist, but I haven't set the time because I could either be in the dental chair for 5 minutes or I could be there for an hour and a half. And so I need to find out how long I'll be there before I can set the news up. Look forward to talking to you all later on. Be sure to hit the like button. We only got 472 likes, but 3,700 people tuned in. What's up with that? Stop being freeloaders. You're not being charged for this. Just hit the button.
That was easy.
Thank you so much. And if you're not a subscriber, please become a subscriber. I appreciate a lot of people watch the program without being subscribers, but I don't get credit for it, and I also don't get the ad revenue if there's ads. If you get forced to watch ads, it's not my fault. YouTube's sticking them in. I've turned them off. It's manual insertion. So any ad that's come in here, YouTube did that. If they put it in and I don't put it in, they take 100% of the revenue. So the least you could do is subscribe to the channel. If you're worried about people tracking you, don't worry. I work at the National Security Agency. We can track you regardless. You're not hidden. You can all be found. We can all be found on the internet. So if you're on the internet, whether you've got an account or not, we can find you. You've got an IP address, we can find you. So when I say we, I'm talking the big brother can find you, not me personally. All right, so or maybe I can find you. But seriously, please go ahead and subscribe to the channel. Could use the support and help it grow. And thanks a lot. And once again, my thanks to my guest, Jacques Broodryk from AfriForum, for sharing that with us. And for those who don't know the history of South Africa, very complicated, exciting, intense, and very enriching story of the history of South Africa. maybe you should go learn it. It is fascinating. And what is taught in South African schools is not even remotely the truth these days. All right, folks, take care. We'll see you in a couple hours right here on the channel. Cheers. Thanks a lot. Really appreciate being here.